night overhead and a fresh breeze behind us. As I had surmised, we were in pursuit of the vessel in which Ingleby and his wife had left the island that afternoon. The ship was French, and was employed in the timber trade. Her name was La Grâce de Dieu. Nothing more was known of her than that she was bound for Lisbon, that she had been driven out of her course, and that she had touched at Madeira, short of men and short of provisions. The last want had been supplied, but not the first. Sailors distrusted the seaworthiness of the ship, and disliked the look of the vagabond crew. When those two serious facts had been communicated to Mr. Blanchard, the hard words he had spoken to his child in the first shock of discovering that she had helped to deceive him smote him to the heart. He instantly determined to give his daughter a refuge on board his own vessel, and to quiet her by keeping her villain of a husband out of the way of all harm at my hands. The yacht sailed 3 feet and more to the ship's 1. There was no doubt of our overtaking La Grâce de Dieu. The only fear was that we might pass her in the darkness. After we had been some little time out, the wind suddenly dropped, and there fell on us an airless, sultry calm. When the order came to get the topmasts on deck and to shift the large sails, we all knew what to expect. In little better than an hour more, the storm was upon us, the thunder was pealing over our heads, and the yacht was running for it. She was a powerful schooner-rigged vessel of 300 tons, as strong as wood and iron could make her, and she was handled by a sailing-master who thoroughly understood his work, and she behaved nobly. As the new morning came, the fury of the wind, blowing still from the south-west quarter, subsided a little, and the sea was less heavy. Just before daybreak, we heard faintly, through the howling of the gale, the report of a gun. The men, collected anxiously on deck, looked at each other and said, "There she is!" With the daybreak we saw the vessel, and the timber ship it was. She lay wallowing in the trough of the sea, her foremast and her mainmast both gone, a waterlogged wreck. The yacht carried 3 boats, 1 amidships and 2 slung to davits on the quarters, and the sailing-master, seeing signs of the storm renewing its fury before long, determined on lowering the quarter-boats while the lull lasted. Few as the people were on board the wreck, they were too many for 1 boat, and the risk of trying 2 boats at once was thought less, in the critical state of the weather, than the risk of making 2 separate trips from the yacht to the ship. There might be time to make 1 trip in safety, but no man could look at the heavens and say there would be time enough for 2. The boats were manned by volunteers from the crew, I being in the second of the 2. When the first boat had got alongside of the timber ship, a service of difficulty and danger which no words can describe, all the men on board made a rush to leave the wreck together. If the boat had not been pulled off again before the whole of them had crowded in, the lives of all must have been sacrificed. As our boat approached the vessel in its turn, we arranged that 4 of us should get on board, 2, I being one of them, to see to the safety of Mr. Blanchard's daughter, and 2 to beat back the cowardly remnant of the crew if they tried to crowd in first. The other 3, the coxswain and 2 oarsmen, were left in the boat to keep her from being crushed by the ship. What the others saw when they first boarded La Grâce de Dieu, I don't know. What I saw was the woman whom I had lost, the woman vilely stolen from me, lying in a swoon on the deck. We lowered her, insensible, into the boat. The remnant of the crew, 5 in number, were compelled by main force to follow her in an orderly manner, one by one, and minute by minute, as the chance offered for safely taking them in. I was the last who left, and at the next roll of the ship towards us, the empty length of the deck, without a living creature on it from stem to stern, told the boat's crew that their work was done. With the louder and louder howling of the fast-rising tempest to warn them, they rowed for their lives back to the yacht. A succession of heavy squalls had brought round the course of the new storm that was coming from the south to the north, and the sailing master, watching his opportunity, had wore the yacht to be ready for it. Before the last of our men had got on board again, it burst on us with the fury of a hurricane. Our boat was swamped, but not a life was lost. Once more we ran before it, due south, at the mercy of the wind. I was on deck with the rest, watching the one rag of sail we could venture to set, and waiting to supply its place with another if it blew out of the bolt ropes, when the mate came close to me and shouted in my ear through the thunder of the storm, "She has come to her senses in the cabin, and has asked for her husband. Where is he?" Not a man on board knew. The yacht was searched from one end to another without finding him. The men were mustered in defiance of the weather. He was not among them. The crews of the two boats were questioned. All the first crew could say was that they had pulled away from the wreck when the rush into their boat took place, and that they knew nothing of who they let in or who they kept out. All the second crew could say was that they had brought back to the yacht every living soul left by the first boat on the deck of the timber ship. There was no blaming anybody, but at the same time there was no resisting the fact that the man was missing. All through that day the storm, raging unabatedly, never gave us even the shadow of a chance of returning and searching the wreck. The one hope for the yacht was to scud. Towards evening, the gale, after having carried us out to the southward of Madeira, began at last to break. The wind shifted again and allowed us to bear up for the island. Early the next morning we got back into port. Mr. Blanchard and his daughter were taken ashore, the sailing master accompanying them and warning us that he should have something to say on his return which would nearly concern the whole crew. We were mustered on deck and addressed by the sailing master as soon as he came on board again. He had Mr. Blanchard's orders to go back at once to the timber ship and to search for the missing man. We were bound to do this for his sake and for the sake of his wife, whose reason was despaired of by the doctors if something was not done to quiet her. We might be almost sure of finding the vessel still afloat, for her lading of timber would keep her above water as long as her hull held together. If the man was on board, living or dead, he must be found and brought back. And if the weather continued to moderate, there was no reason why the men, with proper assistance, should not bring the ship back too, and, their master being quite willing, earn their share of the salvage with the officers of the yacht. Upon this the crew gave 3 cheers, and set to work forthwith to get the schooner to sea again. I was the only one of them who drew back from the enterprise. I told them the storm had upset me. I was ill and wanted rest. They all looked me in the face as I passed through them on my way out of the yacht, but not a man of them spoke to me. I waited through that day at a tavern on the port for the first news from the wreck. It was brought towards nightfall by one of the pilot boats which had taken part in the enterprise for saving the abandoned ship. La Grâce de Dieu had been discovered still floating, and the body of Ingleby had been found on board, drowned in the cabin. At dawn the next morning the dead man was brought back by the yacht, and on the same day the funeral took place in the Protestant cemetery. "Stop!" said the voice from the bed, before the reader could turn a new leaf and begin the next paragraph. There was a change in the room, and there were changes in the audience since Mr. Neal had last looked up from the narrative. A ray of sunshine was crossing the death-bed, and the child, overcome by drowsiness, lay peacefully asleep in the golden light. The father's countenance had altered visibly. Forced into action by the tortured mind, the muscles of the lower face, which had never moved yet, were moving distortedly now. Warned by the damps gathering heavily on his forehead, the doctor had risen to revive the sinking man. On the